Welcome everyone to my second post-playthrough thoughts and review video. The first one was fun to make, and I feel like I learned a lot from it, so we're doing it again. As usual, there won't be a numerical score at the end of this video. We're focusing more on discussion around the game, as well as some general opinions and history. Over the summer, I played through the longest game in the history of my channel, The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. I just want to warn everyone that, although I'll try to keep spoilers at a minimum, there will be some minor spoilers throughout this video. With that out of the way, here are my thoughts on Skyrim. Skyrim is one of those games that, at this point, virtually everyone has played. The game's been released on an abundance of platforms since its original release in 2011, and in that time, I've had friends put in thousands of hours into this game. Personally, I'd never played Skyrim before, and I feel like I was in a significant minority, even if that might not really be true. But with the monumental reputation of Skyrim, I should give the game a shot, shouldn't I? I genuinely don't remember when I bought Skyrim, or really for what reason, only that I did so in high school. In 9th grade, I tried giving the game a shot, but I was playing a really poorly made stealth archer build while still trying to be a moral paragon, as I used to do at the time. I never started any major quest lines and just wound up bored, quitting after only 9 hours of gameplay. At another point in the next few years, The Elder Scrolls II: Daggerfall became available for free download, and I gave that game a shot too. But I made a custom class, and the game's mechanics were not kind to me. I quit that game after exiting the first dungeon and roaming aimlessly from town to town. So I had very limited experience with the Elder Scrolls series, and clearly I was missing something. Part of this must have been my attention span. When I was younger, I had a very hard time playing games from start to finish, often picking up and dropping new games all the time. I knew Skyrim couldn't really be a bad game if it was so popular, right? At the very least, I should give it one more shot, with a conscious focus on seeing it all the way through to its end. So, did Skyrim treat me better on my second time playing the game? Given that I've never actually achieved anything, how did my technically blind playthrough go? I played through the original 2011 PC release of Skyrim for my playthrough. I do own the Enhanced Special Edition. I think it came free to Skyrim owners on Steam at some point. But I was worried that my laptop wouldn't be able to handle streaming and running the game, so I opted for the original experience. I played the game with all 3 expansions installed: Dawnguard, Dragonborn, and Hearthfire. Between Skyrim's massive modding community and the enhanced editions, some people would laugh at Skyrim's graphics today. I had some people in my chat call the game ugly, but I just can't agree. I remember when Skyrim was considered the pinnacle of graphical performance, and I still found joy roaming the Skyrim countryside. Between its frigid tundras, grassy forests, open plains, and more, I found Skyrim's world to be beautiful. Just wandering around the game from time to time made me reflect on some of my gaming preferences. I thoroughly enjoy nature walks in the real world, and I suddenly realized that the same is true for video games. Exploration is calming and fun to me. Skyrim's music may take a back seat to its visuals and gameplay, but some of the calming tracks augment the overworld exploration well, and the battle music adds some good intensity. Sound design in certain dungeons or creepier areas felt good to me, since some of the more subtle tones amplified the tension of creeping forward into the unknown. This might not have been nearly as affected had I not been playing a stealth character. Unfortunately, I can't remember a large chunk of Skyrim's soundtrack. Despite the soundtrack fitting the game very well, and there not really being a bad track, the fact that I can't remember a large percentage of it means I can only classify it as good. I can't overlook the title theme and its variations, since that's iconic and memorable. But my overall favorite track in the game? Secunda, playing right now, since it often accompanied some magical moments in exploration, especially when finding an aurora at night. My character for this playthrough was Rajtovik, the Khajiit spellsword assassin. I wanted to get the most out of the game that I could, so I went for what my chat told me was a relatively unconventional build. Sneak, one-handed, destruction, restoration, enchantment, and light armor were my most used skills. My favorite part about the game was how my character became a lot more fleshed out through gameplay, mostly by accident. There was a moment when I realized both my sword and dagger were enchanted with ice-based enchantments. My best destruction spell was Ice Spike, my most used shout was Ice Form, and I had insane frost resistance. My character became the Shadow of the North, an assassin focused almost entirely around stealth and frost. It was really cool how things came together like that. Skyrim also offered me some avenue for roleplaying. Rajtovik's main philosophy throughout the game was, "You're good to me, I'll be good to you." I tried to not be a morally good character the whole way through, breaking out of my comfort zone a little bit, but I also didn't want to be a complete asshole. That would also be hard. Skyrim's dialogue trees aren't super deep or anything, but there were enough meaningful choices throughout the game to establish myself as a character, not just a build. I played the game on Adept difficulty, the game's default, and there were only a few situations in which I had a really hard time. I felt the difficulty was fairly solid all the way through. In many situations, I couldn't just run up and go toe-to-toe with someone without thinking, which should be the case given my build, but I also didn't suffer many needless deaths. On boss fights, I might have had to try 2 or 3 times, sometimes more in tougher fights, and I definitely died on occasion from underestimating a regular enemy. But nothing really felt unfair on this difficulty, with one exception. I hated that enemies can have execute animations. While these animations are really cool when you do them, I ran into a few situations where if I had another moment to react, as I would if the enemy was simply swinging their sword or whatever at me, I could have healed enough to not die. Unfortunately, since the animation triggered, I may have missed those few precious frames. I had one situation that's burned into my memory where I used potions to fully heal myself. When I exited the menu, a dragon was already in its eat animation, and I instantly died at full health. Why does this exist in a single-player game? It's needlessly frustrating in my opinion. Skyrim's combat felt fun to me, but I can only comment on what I experienced since there's so many diverse builds. One-handed fighting felt quick and satisfying, and after some time I found a few animation cancels. Light attacks can be quickly cancelled into a standing power attack, and weapons can be swapped out with no animation if you use hotkeys to change a weapon and a spell at the same time. I didn't find much use out of power attacks other than the standing or advancing varieties, but if I were more reliant on direct combat, I may have found a use. Destruction spells helped me supplement my style with a ranged option, but since I wasn't specializing in the tree, my magicka was lacking a bit, and I couldn't get access to the highest level spells by the end of my playthrough, which ended at level 47. This meant that my damage in that department did fall off a bit right at the end. I did enjoy how each of the major elements had different applications. Frost to drain stamina, lightning to drain magicka, and fire for bonus damage, even if only frost ended up being strong enough to use because of how I distributed my skill points. Discovering hotkeys was also the greatest thing for my magic usage, since it kept the action a lot more fast-paced. The game clearly wasn't designed around sneak for the most part, which led to some frustrating moments for me. I had just finished playing Thief Gold and was used to being able to sneak exclusively through skill. However, Skyrim's a bit more luck dependent due to the numbers behind it. At low-level sneak, you can be detected for seemingly no reason. Eventually, I accepted that some situations are unstealthable, and eventually I had more fun with it. Low levels can be pretty painful, however, if you're ill-equipped or if your expectations don't suit the game. Once you level up, however, you can develop some very interesting play patterns. My backstabs ended up doing obscene damage by late game, since I was built mostly around that. I could dip in and out of invisibility, casting Soul Trap before hiding again to move in for the kill, keeping my enchantments online. The X-Form Shout helped me isolate priority targets and get the 1v1 I wanted. My character had 2 viable fighting styles for stealth and unstealth combat, and both were very enjoyable. I think I should complain a little bit about dungeons, though. Every single dungeon, cave, or other miscellaneous zone to traverse was extremely linear, with a few secrets scattered within. Each dungeon had one main path from point A to point B with a boss at the end, and some rewards, often pertaining to a quest. I enjoyed these dungeons for the most part, but in retrospect, I entirely blame them for my 9th grade self losing interest in the game. Going through these areas without something to motivate you, like either a quest or a self-imposed goal, is time-consuming and boring. Although they serve their purpose well, there are situations where it feels like the dungeons have no purpose, and their linearity feels out of place in a game like this. Dungeons are easily the weakest point of Skyrim in my opinion. Skyrim is obviously a massive game, and there's a lot more to it than just the main story. In order to cover the most about the narrative of the game, I'll be talking about each of the major guild quest lines that I completed, since that was the focus of my playthrough. In this order, I completed the Thieves Guild, the College of Winterhold, Dragonborn, the Dark Brotherhood, the main storyline, and Dawnguard. I never did the Civil War, the Companions, or the Bard's College, so I can't comment on those. But here's what I thought about those storylines. The Thieves Guild in Riften was my first major questline, and this is what finally got me invested in Skyrim. Before joining the guild, I was really worried that I wasn't enjoying the game as much as I should, but having an actual narrative to follow really augmented my enjoyment of the game. On joining the guild, you find them in a bad spot. At first, you start by honing your skills, helping the guild however you can, but eventually you find yourself tangled up in a mystery involving someone potentially sabotaging the guild's status. A few quests and twists later, and suddenly you're involved in something a bit bigger than you expected, with some good friends by your side. This is the best I can explain without spoiling anything, unfortunately. The questline is very long, with some interesting objectives, and not all of it revolves just around stealing something, especially near the end. I loved how the areas you visited were actually designed around sneaking, because I could compensate a bit for my low sneak skill with smart movements. This series of missions helps to teach me how stealth worked in Skyrim, and when it is and isn't a viable option. Having this knowledge meant I enjoyed the game a lot more. All of the quest rewards were super valuable to me as well. I literally used some of the weapons, armors, and skills right until the end of my playthrough. My only real criticism is that some of the guild members felt a bit shallow. While the major players like Brynjolf, Vex, and Delvin were memorable and alright to talk to, there's a lot of people in here who do nothing but tell their life story once. While interesting to listen to, this doesn't really make me remember them in the long run. Overall, the Thieves Guild had a good story, well-designed stealth sections in the context of Skyrim, some standout characters but many weak ones, and incredibly fun rewards to play with. I would absolutely recommend this questline. I'm honestly a bit disappointed with this questline, unfortunately. If you're playing any sort of spellcaster, then having access to the College of Winterhold is invaluable. You're able to purchase most spells from here, and it's a good spot to have consistent access to an alchemy table or enchanting table. The setup to this questline is also quite good, with a class expedition to the ruins of Sarthal stumbling across something of great power that may have disastrous consequences. But from that point on, it's not super interesting. There's some creative usage of magic and some decent puzzles, but nothing that really tests your limits as a spellcaster. Tolfdir, Urag, and Jazargo are some fun, standout characters, and I don't feel anyone is as weak as some of the Thieves Guild members, but there's some of your fellow academics who aren't that interesting. It's also painfully obvious who's going to prove to be a problem for you in the end, and the questline ends very abruptly, which left a sour taste in my mouth. Rewards were good, but not useful to my particular character, and I really wish there was a way to reject the title you're granted, since my character was dangerously underqualified for it. I did enjoy the questline. The college was one of my favorite locations in the game. Its resources were invaluable for mages, but the whole line just reeks of missed potential, unfortunately. I would still recommend playing through it. Dragonborn. This was the first DLC questline I completed. Dragonborn gives you access to the island of Solstheim, off the coast of Morrowind. I technically shouldn't have had access to this questline yet, given my progress in the main story, but in typical Skyrim fashion, the game bugged out and triggered the inciting event early. Solstheim was an interesting change of pace, giving me new locations to explore, and I've made it clear I enjoy that. The questline opens with an uneasy atmosphere, since something is clearly wrong on Solstheim, and it's up to you to figure out the intentions of a strange cult who seem to have placed some inhabitants of the island under some sort of spell. Things escalate quickly to world-ending proportions as you seek to grow as strong as your new adversary who you meet later in the storyline. The Daedric involvement in this quest leads to situations unlike any other in the game. The realm of Apocrypha is such a surreal experience. The major characters in this storyline, like Niloth and Freya, are solid characters, and the final fight is a rush. With this main plotline, plus the sheer scope of content on the island of Solstheim, Dragonborn is absolutely worth it. However, I do have one criticism. The game advertised a dragon riding feature, which turned out to be extremely underwhelming and disappointing. That, however, does not nullify the rest of the pack. It comes bundled with most versions of Skyrim now, but if you've got the original release and don't have it, I would recommend picking it up. The Dark Brotherhood. I'm dead inside. I don't dare speak too much about this questline in fear of spoiling it by mistake. The Dark Brotherhood questline is by far the best in the game. Every character in the guild is more than a cardboard cutout, and I loved talking to all of them. The characters all interact with each other as well, creating a cohesive community. Though the way to start the questline is a bit cryptic, once you're in, every single quest is enjoyable. Since you're an assassin, what you're doing is obviously illegal. Trying to figure out how you're going to pull off your kills is incredible, since you can do it with no bounty if you're good enough, which I managed to do. The questline ramps up in intensity fast and doesn't stop getting crazier. The single most emotional moment I experienced was in this questline, and that wasn't even the end of the questline. I'm sorry for being vague about this whole section, but I cannot risk giving anything away. It was so good. Play it yourself. Alright, the main storyline. So this is what Skyrim's all about. The Return of Dragons. Basic plot synopsis, which isn't really a spoiler since you learn in the first hour or two of gameplay. Dragons are back, thanks to their head honcho Alduin. This is obviously not a good thing, and a lot of people would like the dragons to not be back, so you, discovering yourself to be the Dragonborn, the only one who can naturally use the power of the dragons, the voice, must stop them. Throughout the storyline, you meet many people and groups as you seek to fulfill your destiny to defeat Alduin, discovering how to go about doing so as the stakes get higher and higher. The storyline is solidly put together and follows a good curve of rising action, but it does feel like a more solitary adventure than the field quests, because you don't spend too much time with one group of people. Overall solid with good moments and meaningful choices to make in the middle of it, unlike some other questlines, which was refreshing. I will say, however, that if your only intention is to complete the main storyline, you're really missing out, since this game has so much more to offer. Finally, we took on the Dawnguard expansion. In this pack, you join a guild of vampire hunters, but it doesn't stay as simple as killing vampires for long. We've got another world-ending prophecy this time, except you can choose your path. Do you stay faithful to the Dawnguard and put a stop to it, or do you join the vampires? I chose Dawnguard, despite Isran, the leader, really making me not want to sometimes. Dawnguard brings you to some incredibly cool locations, with two minor areas the same size as Blackreach from the main storyline. The two combined might be about the same size as Solstheim. The shining gem of this pack is Serana, one of the strongest characters I've encountered in the entire game. Since she acts as your follower for the majority of the questline, you can really form a connection with her. You'll learn a lot about her past and her feelings, and through conversation you can develop your own character a little bit too. I didn't use followers for most of my playthrough since they'd spoil my stealth, so I don't believe the rest are this fleshed out, but if they are, then I was missing out. It feels like there's a genuine partnership between you and Serana, something that no other part of the game that I experienced could replicate. Dawnguard has many solid moments and is absolutely worth my time. I'm very glad I didn't quit before playing through this storyline, as was my original plan. Let's wrap things up. How did I feel about Skyrim? Well, safe to say, I enjoyed the game a lot. It's clearly got some flaws. Though I didn't encounter as many bugs as the game's reputation would lead me to expect, there were some interesting and immersion-breaking moments in there. Though the combat was simple, it was still fun, and I encountered many amazing people and places throughout my playthrough. I can say, without a doubt, that I am now a fan of the Elder Scrolls series. I've not played a game like Skyrim before, and I'm very glad I finally took the time to do so. Skyrim took me 4 months, 32 streams to complete, and I've still not seen most of what the game has to offer. Not many games have convinced me to do a second playthrough immediately after finishing my first. But as of the time this video goes live, I've already started a second on my Switch, for car trips and for downtime at school. I also now fully intend to check out previous games in the series, but that might be a ways away considering how long Skyrim took me. I'm sorry for being so vague for a chunk of the review, but I wanted to stay as spoiler-free as possible. I may reconsider that for future videos, so let me know what you thought of this at the end of this review, and if you want me to change that. If this is the first you've seen of my content, you can find me at twitch.tv/turkey723. And if you were here for the Skyrim streams, thank you so much for being a part of this adventure with me. Have a wonderful day, and take care.